majority of the European summer transfer windows have concluded. So let's talk about some of those transfers. Today's episode is a little bit of a different one. It's a little bit more of a fun one as I break down 3 transfers that I'm very, very excited to see how they play out. This summer transfer window was a really interesting one. Not only was it a very, very fun one to watch, but also it was one that happened during a World Cup year. A lot of transfers that happened after the World Cup you probably would have never seen happening prior to the World Cup. A lot of big teams were able to strengthen, a lot of leagues were able to strengthen their leagues as a whole, as the entire parity conversation. In the same conversation, a lot of teams were able to keep their star players and keep their own developing and young players, which also is a very fun, interesting conversation during transfer windows. Not only do you want to strengthen your squad, but you also want to maintain the strength that you already have from previous seasons. That is exactly what makes transfer windows super, super exciting. Today is a breakdown 3 of the player profiles that moved. How do I think they're going to fit in with their new squads? I'll be using FBref. This website is literally your go-to website that you will be needing during the upcoming seasons. FBref is a stat head website that you can access on your phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, literally from anywhere, and you don't even need an account to sign up. It is that accessible and it is that easy. There is an abundance of stats that we're definitely going to be going through today. There's an abundance of numbers that are super fun to look at in terms of context, in terms of studying players, teams, competition. The amount of history that's on there as well is incredible. If you're not already using this website, you definitely will want to be for the seasons that are upcoming. So today it's going to be our best friend as we look through some of these transfers. Now again, like I mentioned, I can probably sit down and talk about 20 of my favorite transfers. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time today. I've chosen 3 different players from 3 different leagues. So the first name on our list, and probably a transfer that many people are very excited to see how it plays out, this in my eyes was definitely a steal. We're starting off with Batier. I mean, what a player that she is, and the fact that Barcelona was able to get arguably the best fullback in the current game right now for free is a steal. Whoever was going to get their hands on her, and it obviously was going to be Barcelona, her boyhood club. She spent her youth there, obviously went and made her name, or I guess the status that we all know of Anna today at Manchester United. But now it's very exciting that we're going to see her in the Champions League. We're going to see her against some of the best opposition in Europe, and it's going to be extremely exciting. So let's break down a little bit of what Batier is. Alrighty, I've logged into FBref, and the first thing that I want to do is just look up Batier. There she is, the player herself. The second that you go down, you're able to see a big chunk of her scouting report. Now, Batier's scouting report is one of the most beautiful to look at because it's just straight up green. This scouting report, as you can tell, looks at the last 365 competition days. It also compares it to the majority of the fullbacks in the game. If you're interested how that report is calculated, then you're very much happy to look at how that is. But just looking at Batier, you can tell that she's extremely versatile, and we already know this. And for Barcelona, how they like to deploy and play their fullbacks is super interesting and fun to watch. They're very much expected to be building in the attack, but they need to be reliable and pacey and kind of intelligent enough to track back and be able to have their defensive roles. If it's Lucy Bronze, if it's Frodilina Rolfo playing in that fullback position, you are always expected to see them high on the wings, but also back doing their defensive roles. And Batier not only showed that she's very much capable of doing that at Manchester United, but she did it at a level that is extremely high. Now, this is a great scouting report, but I really want to look at her entire and full scouting report at the last year. You can also choose if you want to compare it in the World Cup or the WSL, the Euros, whichever it is competition you're looking at. But today, I'm kind of a little bit more interested in looking at Batier as a whole. And now, scrolling down a little bit here, you're going to see statistics around goals and assists for fullbacks, right? This is not the game in general for fullbacks. And if you look at the percentiles, she's almost always up in kind of that 85% up range, which is really high. She falls down a little bit on the fact that she's not your penalty taker. She's not expected to be the penalty taker on Barcelona. Now, I'm going to be skipping a little bit of the shooting because she's not a striker, and I don't assume she'll be taking shots left and right. I'm very much interested in passing. Barcelona loves to play that tiki-taka passing style. I don't need to break it down. You've seen it on display. It's beautiful. It is so nice to watch. It's smooth. It's buttery. And that's exactly what a Barcelona player needs to do. be a master at passing and do it in such an efficient manner. And looking at Anna Batier's scouting report here, you can see just that. If you're looking at passes completed to the passes attempted to the pass attempted percentage, an 82% completion of the passes attempted is ridiculously high. That's always exactly what most of the Barcelona players look at. If you're able to look at more scouting reports from those Barcelona players, they're always sitting between that 80 to 87% range, and Anna Batier slotting in the middle is exactly what they would have also wanted. With Barcelona, again, like I mentioned, you are expecting to see those fullbacks play pretty high. They're going to be involved in putting that last one or two passes that connects it kind of to the striker, crosses into the penalty area, passes into the penalty area. Progressive passes is where it is at. Progressive passes is like Anna Batier's bread and butter. I mean, you have watched it across the WSL, even with Spain during the World Cup. She does it so effortlessly. The way she's able to open up these pockets and see those pockets and deliver those progressive passes in them is honestly magical. And this is something that I think will even be highlighted at a much bigger context with Barcelona. Now, dropping down a little bit more to her defensive and possession stats, you can tell that she sits quite high in terms of blocks, shots blocked, passes blocked. The League F has already kicked off, and if you saw her, she was definitely up that one, intercepting those blocks, making sure that the opposition is dispossessed, and kind of in a winger position, or specifically, again, how Barcelona deploys those fullbacks. They're not the ones that are necessarily going to be one-on-one battles, rather than the ones blocking those shots or blocking these passes into that final player, purely because of sometimes how high they're playing. There's almost another line of players behind them. So this is a number that is certainly one that shines with Anna Batier, but specifically again with Barcelona. Need I say more on that possession? She's active, she's always on the ball, she's touching the ball, progressive carries, like I mentioned. She's very important in making sure there's progressive passes get to the areas that they need. She's not dispossessed very often. She's fast, she carries that ball into that final third. She's in there sometimes in the penalty area. She can take a shot from outside the box. This is a signing that I'm very, very excited to see. Again, for Barcelona to have gotten her on a free, that's a steal. Definitely United were not very happy probably to give that away. She's a player that grew up in that teaching system. A lot of her foundations come from the Barcelona teaching school, and the fact that now she's gone back, she's able to show those skills on the display of the Champions League, for example. I am very, very much excited to see how that one plays out. The second player on my list today is Jill Rood, which might take you a little bit by surprise, but I actually really, really like this signing. Jill Rood, for a box-to-box midfielder, actually scores a lot more goals than a player profile like herself would, and actually puts in a huge defensive work. And so her addition of being that special box-to-box midfielder that is very good in both the areas that she occupies, I'm very much excited to see how she's able to combine with the likes of Yui Hasegawa. I think Laura Coombs and Jill Rood and Yui Hasegawa is a midfield that I'm quite excited to see. Manchester City have had a very quiet transfer window. They said before the transfer window that they're not looking to have a crazy transfer window. They sold Hayley Raso to Real Madrid, a transfer that almost made it on the list because it is so good. They've obviously gone. They've had to recall back Jess Park, who was out on loan with Everton, and bought in Jill Rood. Last season, though, Manchester City really lost a lot of their core players. I mean, the likes of Caroline Weir, Georgia Stanway, Kara Walsh, Lucy Bronze, a lot of those core players that have been the face of Manchester City over the last 5 or 6 years left. And they still brought in a lot of names to replace that, and it almost looked like this transfer window was used in a way not to really bring in a lot of players, but stabilize what had been such a big overturn with the squad that they were working with 3 years ago. So I don't dislike the fact that they had a very quiet transfer window. I very much am hoping that they're able to work on those links and be able to put a squad together that has been moved around over the last few years. As we all know, their biggest and weakest link, in my eyes, continues to be Gareth Taylor. But today's focus is not Gareth Taylor, and it's not so much Manchester City. It's actually Jill Rood and how well she actually fits into that system. So looking into Jill Rood here, what I want to do is actually compare Jill Rood to 5 similar players. So if I'm just able to click on here, and I'm going to reshuffle some of those players here a little bit to the players that played at Manchester City. So give me a moment and let me just reshuffle some of those players around. Alrighty, I am back now that I've reshuffled some of those players. So I've got Jill Rood's last season with Wolfsburg. I'm going to be comparing her with Caroline Weir, Kara Walsh, Georgia Stanway seasons with Manchester City, where they won the WSL. That's in the 2021-2022 season. So let's see how close Jill Rood is to some of those players, and how do I think she fits into that Manchester City system, which like I mentioned, I'm very excited to see. Off the bat, you can tell this is going to be a relatively fair comparison, given that the 4 players have played around the same amount of matches, started the same amount of matches. They've also gotten around the same amount of minutes, obviously with the Manchester trio having a little bit more than Jill Rood. Goals, she is very much tied with Caroline Weir. Obviously, that season specifically, Stanway had one hell of a season, but she also took a little bit more shots. What I'm interested in here is the shots on target percentage. For Jill Rood, she sits just under Caroline Weir and Georgia Stanway. A 38.3 percentage for a box-to-box player is very impressive. And again, the numbers that Manchester City would be wanting to achieve in their squad when she's playing. If you're able to slot one column beside it on the amount of shots per 90 minutes, Jill Rood ranks highest, which is why you'd expect her to also sit down highest with the expected amount of goals. Manchester City is not a squad that is needing goals, because we know that they have a lethal front line. Their problem has been missing those big shots, which they've had, and just not being clinical enough. Jill Rood is going to be taking shots, and Jill Rood is always going to sit on a high expected goal percentage, purely because that she's not afraid to take a shot either of close range or very far range. That's another added thing that maybe Manchester City lacked a little bit of, that kind of final edge in that middle of just taking a shot. Slotting down into the passing, obviously nobody can really beat passing numbers when you're going up against Keira Walsh. Pass completion for short passes, that's how Manchester City like to play in the middle of that, is the role that I'm expecting Jill Rood to have. Is not so much those long switch passes, she's more so going to have those kind of medium short passes. So an 89.5, you're beating Caroline Weir, you're sitting just under Keira Walsh. Those are really incredible numbers. For medium passes, I believe she's sitting just a little bit higher than Keira Walsh, which is a very interesting number here. Obviously, again, different seasons, different squads. Understandably, you will see a bit of an inflection there. But again, for Caroline Weir to be sitting in 87, Stanway in 85, Keira Walsh with an astonishing 95, but Jill Rood still being able to complete 94% of her attempted passes. Obviously, as you can tell, she's attempted the least amount of passes from those players, but when attempted, her aim is good, is what you can say when you look at a 94% completion of medium passes. Now, I said she's really good up front, and I also said she's really good defensively, and I think dropping down a little bit to her defensive action, I'm interested in seeing the number of dribblers that she's going after. Again, 81.8 challenges won or attacked from the ones attempted and tackled. Really, really high. Now, she's not one known to usually block. You will not see her between those pathways. You're going to see her adding on that pressure, adding on those tackles. She's going to be closing down that distance with a player who has that ball. She's not so much always in the pockets between passes, so she will fall down on block numbers, which again is interesting in the way how Manchester City will use her. Jill Rood's played in WSL before. If you remember her Arsenal days, used a little bit I guess deeper, maybe the role that she didn't really enjoy, but I think with City she's going to be given, first of all, a lot of playing minutes. Like I mentioned, I'm very excited to see how, if she'll be used as double pivot with Yui Hasegawa, who's going to be their third, I guess, accompanying midfielder, how that midfield comes with her. But her ability is to be such a good, efficient box-to-box midfielder. Like I mentioned, she's up there shooting and she's up there passing those crucial passes that you would want, specifically from a City player. But also she's got that defensive action that she will close in that distance. She'll be able to press and win tackles. For me, it's a bit of a steal for City, and I don't think people are talking about how fun this transfer really is. Fair to say that I'm very much excited to see how she comes back into WSL. Obviously, no Champions League for her this season. She was in the Champions League final last season. How she adjusts to that will also be really, really fun. Is she going to be the difference maker for City to make it in? We don't know. We'll see. The third and final player on my list today is Pannie Harder, who moved to the Frauen Bundesliga of Bayern. She's played in the Frauen Bundesliga before. If you remember her Wolfsburg days before Chelsea bought her on a record fee at that time. Now she's gone and move. Bayern got her for free. You can definitely say what a steal. I mean, Just look at the records that's sitting there. 2 times UEFA Women's Player of the Year, 7-time domestic league champion, 2 times FIFA Women's Player World 11, 2020, obviously, like I mentioned, German Female Football of the Year because she's already been in the Frauen Bundesliga. Her award list is a very, very, very long one. But this is also one of the things that I really enjoy on FBRF is when you log into a single player, you can see some of their trophies that she's won there. Pannie Harder maybe had been slept on a little bit last season given the amount of injuries that she's had. Season before it, she missed out on obviously getting a run in the Champions League after Chelsea was knocked out in the group stages. This is going to be fun. Bayern Munich are building a really special and fun squad. I've enjoyed seeing them build it over the last few years. They have obviously missed on winning the domestic cup. In a few years, they were champions of the league this season. They were knocked out in the quarterfinals against Arsenal in the Champions League. They also were unable to make it past the semis or the quarters the year before it. So Bayern are kind of been on the edge of, right, maybe grabbing a double domestically of the league and the cup, making a deep run in the Champions League, and I feel like Pannie Harder could be one of the major changing factors this season. I really, really do like this, and they got her for free. So let's talk a little bit Pannie Harder here. So I'll be jumping on to compare a little bit of the numbers here. Now, FBRF has suggested that I compare her with Caitlin Ford, which is definitely a fun one. I also am interested in comparing her with Leah Schuler, who she'll be playing with. Now, I'm also very much interested in comparing her to Lohman, who we know is unfortunately out with an ACL injury. Now, for Lohman, I'm going to choose her last season. This is another really fun feature that I love playing around, is you can choose either their international numbers or their club numbers. So again, I'll be looking at last season. For Caitlin Ford, last season looks good. Panella, let's look at 2 seasons ago because obviously she missed a significant amount of last season. I don't really want to see Lauren Hemp in there. This looks like a very fun comparison. All right, we'll go by competition type. We'll stick by domestic league. Alrighty, so let's just get results and see what do we have. Fetching results. Alrighty, beauty. From the get-go, you can tell similar number of matches played, so we know we're getting relatively fair numbers. You're not getting a player who started 1 game with a player that started 20 games. You don't want those numbers to be skewed. This shows it to you the second you fetch those results, which is very, very neat. I'm going straight into the shots per 90. Shots per 90, she sits up very, very high. Now, obviously, I was not expecting Lohman to sit up there, for example, but Schuler is a player that you know will be taking shots. She's got a record amount of numbers in a few seasons here and there. 3.92 shots per 90 is one that will be very shabby. Those are the 2 players that are going to be combining likely up top for Bayern. Leah Schuler and Harder, looking at these numbers, they will be taking shots. Slotting into the passes, I want to look at the long pass completion rate here because I have a feeling that Pannie Harder, and we've seen this previously when she was in the Frauen Bundesliga with Wolfsburg, is she will have more of a free role. She will be allowed to roam on the wings a little bit more. She'll be given that striker duo to play with rather than sometimes be left alone. She will be allowed to switch the play often. I'm loving the fact that she sits up very high with the pass completion with the long passes. Obviously expecting to see Caitlin Ford up there. I'm not surprised. Leah Schuler is more of a striker. You will not typically be seeing her delivering those long passes. But with Lohman being out and Pannie Harder being a player that you know will have a high percentage of pass completion is a very important added name to the squad. Slotting down a little bit more to the goal and shot creation. Now, I haven't actually looked at this, but I do have a feeling she sits pretty high at goal creation action. Let's look per 90. She does. Yeah, 0.60. Again, I'm expecting her numbers to be very close to Ford. But that's pretty dangerous. This is a player that you want to be adding to your squad. I also feel like she sits very similarly with shot created action. Yeah, 54 to Caitlin Ford, 64. Not a bad name to have in there that's creating shots, creating goals, creating those actions that will put opposition under pressure in their own box. We can sit here all day and compare Pannie Harder to so many other players. I mean, for funsies, let's just compare her to the likes of, I don't know, Sam Kerr, a player who she played with. And let's go for Katoto maybe from a few seasons ago. Alrighty, let's maybe compare her to this season here. They were playing alongside each other. Katoto, before she got injured, will get a very healthy Katoto here. Again, these are really fun numbers to look at, and this always helps you in putting into perspective the different players, the different player roles that they have, comparing them with players, for example, like Jill Rood, how I compared him with players that were previously in the squad. You get an understanding of how that squad wants to play. Which numbers are they looking at? Which numbers are they prioritizing? 5-6 players who played for the same squad, ranking high in the same exact number, is something that those stats and those analysis folks in the back room are looking at and studying. I just sat here for the last few minutes comparing those 3 players, and I can assure you it is extremely fun. Now, those are the 3 transfers that I'm excited to see how they slot into their new squads. Like I mentioned, this could have been 20, 30 different other players. As a Canadian, I was very happy to see a lot of the Canadians get moves. Evelyn Viens to Rome. Obviously, Chloe Lacasse, one that I have advocated for and have been a Chloe Lacasse fan for quite some time. So seeing her get that big move to Arsenal, who I think is going to be a great move for her so far. You've also got the likes of Deanne Rose to the Foxes. Who else are we talking about? Adriana Leon, Ashley Lawrence. There's a lot of big Canadians on the move, and I loved it. This has been a fun transfer window to watch from a Canadian perspective. Speaking of Arsenal, I mean, they've had one hell of a window. Cooney Cross grabbing her own deadline day. That was fun to see. United, they lost Russo to Arsenal. They lost on a Batier, like I just mentioned, both on freeze. But they've also built a very unique squad, similar with the many other teams in the league and out of the league. It's been quite a fun one. These are the 3 transfers that I'm very much excited to see how they slot into their new systems. Like I mentioned, looking at those numbers, there's definitely a lot of science that went into behind it. And I'm very excited to see how they play out. Now, let me know your thoughts on some of the transfers that you enjoyed watching, some of the transfers that I just talked about. How do you think it's going to play out for some of these players? Let me know. And as always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.